So let's talk about a really fascinating little book from 1925 called The Game of Life and How to Play It. Now, its author, Florence Scovel Shinn, put forward this pretty radical idea. What if life isn't some random battle we have to fight? What if it's actually a game with clear rules? And, if you can learn the rules, you can learn how to play it well.
Have you ever had that feeling like life is just this series of random events, but somehow they keep leading you back to the same place, the same problems, the same struggles, again and again? You get a new job, but then the same old conflicts start to pop up. Or you start a new relationship, and before you know it, the same frustrations are right there on the surface. It can really feel like you're just stuck in a loop you can't get out of.
This is where Shinn's idea comes in, and it's a total reframe of that whole experience. She's basically saying, hey, what if we stop seeing ourselves as victims, constantly fighting against the world? And instead, what if we start seeing ourselves as active players in a game? So to really get a handle on how to play, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to lay out the rules of the game as she saw them. Then we'll look at some of the really surprising modern science that actually backs up these ideas that are, a century old. And then at the end, I'm going to give you one simple practice you can use today to start playing this game a lot more skillfully. Okay, so when Shinn says life is a game, she doesn't mean it's trivial, like it doesn't matter. Not at all. What she means is that it's a structured way of interacting with reality, and it's based on some very specific, predictable principles. It's not about fighting what happens to you, it's about learning how to skillfully play with the hand you're dealt. The number one rule of this game is that what you send out is what you get back. It's that ancient wisdom she talks about. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Think about it like this. Our thoughts, our words, even our actions, they're like boomerangs. They always, always return to us. And if that's true, it means the reality we're experiencing is really just a direct reflection of what we're putting out there. So the big question is, what are you sending out? And this right here really shows that huge shift in perspective with a battle mindset. You see yourself as a passive victim. You're always on the defensive, right? Life is happening to you. But with a game mindset, you become an active participant. Life starts to happen through you. Look, you can't always control the circumstances you're given, but you can always control your response to them. And that's where all your power is. And this idea is not new. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus used this great metaphor of a ball game. He said the ball itself, the external stuff in life, like our job, our health, what people think of us, that stuff is indifferent. We don't ultimately control it. What really matters is our skill in handling the ball. How we choose to catch it, how we choose to throw, what life sends our way, that is the real game. So if life is a game, then how do we keep score? Well, this is where it gets really cool, because modern science gives us this fascinating look into the psychological and biological mechanics that seem to be running the whole show. This brings us to a concept called cognitive appraisal. And what it tells us is that it's not the event itself, say losing a job or getting some criticism, that actually causes our suffering. It's the story we tell ourselves about it. So if we appraise a situation as a threat, our body literally goes into a stress response. But if we can see that exact same situation as a challenge, we can access things like resilience and problem solving. Your interpretation literally creates your emotional reality. Then you've got something called the expectation effect. Our brain is basically a prediction machine. It's constantly using our past experiences and our current beliefs to guess what's going to happen next. And then it filters what we see to match those predictions. It's wild. So if you believe a task is going to be exhausting, you're way more likely to feel exhausted. If you expect an opportunity to show up, your brain will literally start scanning your environment for it. We tend to see what we expect to see. And this is where it all comes together. This is how those repeating patterns get locked in so tightly. It's called the habit loop, and it explains that any action or reaction that we repeat enough times becomes an automated behavior. See, a cue in our environment triggers a routine response, which gives us some kind of reward. And over time, this whole process becomes so automatic, we don't even have to think about it. That's why our reactions to stress or conflict can feel so reflexive. They're literally wired into our neurology. So here's the crucial point. Shinn's almost spiritual language from 100 years ago maps directly onto these modern scientific concepts. Her law of karma is just the principle of action and consequence. Her imaging faculty, this power of visualization, is what we now call selective attention and the expectation effect. And her subconscious mind, well, that's a perfect description of the automated programs we now just call habits. Okay, so that's all the theory. But how do we actually use this stuff? Let's look at 3 really practical ways you can start playing the game more effectively in different parts of your life. So let's take work. Instead of seeing a setback and labeling it a problem, you can practice what's called cognitive reframing. You just ask yourself a different question. Instead of, why is this happening? Ask, what does this make possible? Just that simple question shifts you out of a threat response and into a creative, problem-solving state. You're consciously choosing a new interpretation, a new story, and that changes everything about how your mind and body respond. Okay, how about in relationships? Here, the game is all about focusing only on what you can actually control. Your own words, your own actions, your own goodwill. That's it. It's that classic Stoic idea. When you release that need to manage the other person's behavior, you stop playing a game of force and you start playing a game of integrity. And you know what happens? Resentment starts to dissolve because your peace of mind is no longer dependent on how they respond. And then there are habits. We can draw on the wisdom of Aristotle here. Excellence isn't some single heroic act. It's just what we do over and over again. And every single time you consciously choose a new response to an old trigger, like, say, taking a deep breath instead of snapping in anger, you're literally building a new neural pathway. You're deliberately designing a brand new habit loop that with a little practice will become just as automatic as the old one was. So, where do you start with all this? I know, it can seem like a lot, but there's one simple foundational move you can make today to start playing this game with a lot more intention. I call it the game reset. It's just 3 simple steps. First, just notice your automatic reaction, that little surge of anger or fear or frustration. That's it, just notice it. Second, pause and identify the story you're telling yourself that's causing that feeling. Are you telling yourself, this is so unfair, or maybe I'm definitely going to fail? And then third, consciously choose a more useful story, not a fake one, but a more empowering one. This tiny shift from mindless reaction to conscious response, it is the single most important skill in the entire game. So let's just bring it all together. The main things to remember are these. Life is a game of skill, not some random battle of chance. Your reality is powerfully, powerfully shaped by how you interpret events. The things you practice over and over again, they become your automatic reality. And maybe most importantly, in every single moment, you have the power to choose your response. So I'll just leave you with this question. What if that one thing in your life that you see as your biggest, most impossible challenge, what if it's actually just a part of the game that you haven't learned how to play yet? If you want to keep exploring these ideas, be sure to check out the next part of this series in our playlist.